Hey everybody, welcome to another Purple Insider Extra. Matthew Coller here inside TCO Performance Center. Just finished up listening to Mike Zimmer talk about a number of topics, including Everson Griffen signing with the Vikings. So they worked him out last week. Now Everson Griffen officially back. We'll give you the main headline from what Mike Zimmer said about Everson Griffen. He called him a situational player, which makes it really interesting now to find out how they're going to approach the right defensive end position across from Danielle Hunter. Will it be Stephen Weatherly or DJ Wanham to start and then Everson Griffen coming in on third downs? How long will that last? Will we eventually see Everson Griffen emerge as the starter but begin the season against Cincinnati and Arizona as more of a situational player since he is joining the team late? Now, if you look at the numbers from last season that Everson Griffen put up, they were simply much better than what the Vikings got out of DJ Wanham or what Carolina got out of Stephen Weatherly. Everson Griffen alone had more sacks than both players. He also ranked 28th when it came to pass rush win rate, according to Pro Football Focus. And Stephen Weatherly was 109th and DJ Wanham was 101st. Now, of course, the story is not written on either one of those players. Stephen Weatherly was much better than that when he was a Minnesota Viking as a situational player. And DJ Wanham is somebody that they have liked in the past and liked his development from last year. But what this signifies is that they are not happy with those two guys or not confident with those two guys being the only ones that hold down that position. And the players behind Stephen Weatherly and DJ Wanham very much up in the air if any of them can contribute right away. Patrick Jones was drafted in the third round, Janarius Robinson in the fourth round. We haven't seen enough from either one of those players to believe that they could be a consistent contributor this year. The other players like Jalen Holmes, Hercules Mataafa, they've had several years to prove that there was more there than just being backup players who kind of bounce around the league. But that looks like what might be the case now as the Vikings will get into their cuts after the third preseason game. And I would guess that we're talking about a few players who have been here for a couple of years who will no longer be here. Now, there is one interesting guy who had a great game the other night. Kenny Willekes had 3 pressures on 13 pass rush snaps. He looks like he might be set for the practice squad for this year, but just a guy to keep an eye on. Circling back to Everson Griffen, the elephant in the room on Griffen was some of the tweets that he sent out earlier this offseason, criticizing Kirk Cousins and even saying that Mike Zimmer never wanted Kirk Cousins to begin with. Now, Everson apologized for those tweets on Twitter, but it will be interesting to see if Kirk Cousins has anything to say about the Vikings bringing in Everson Griffen. I would not suspect that he will be critical of the move or that he'll address what Everson Griffen tweeted. But I think what it says is that this year, the Vikings are relying on their defense to be the reason that they are much better than they were last year. At 7-9, they were 29th in defense, and there's a lot of pressure after all the money that they've spent on the defensive side for Mike Zimmer to get much more out of that defense. So any weakness that they have to do everything possible to try and fill that weakness regardless of anyone's feelings. And I think right now the relationship couldn't be much more distant between Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins anyway, based on the vaccination status and the things that were said publicly by Mike Zimmer, who, by the way, doubled down today, or is it tripled down maybe? They brought in Mike Osterholm, who is an expert on COVID and COVID research, to talk with the team, to really talk to a small percentage of the team that is still unvaccinated. Amir Smith-Marset was asked what he thought of the presentation, and he kind of looked around and said, well, I'm vaccinated, so, I don't know what to say about that. But that relationship between Zimmer and Cousins has already been distant because of the vaccination issue. And so maybe it doesn't matter that they've decided to bring someone in who had insulting tweets about the quarterback, because there's always been a separation between Zimmer and his defense and what's going on the offensive side. But it is something that is worth noting, because I'm not sure how many teams would bring in a player who had said things publicly about the quarterback, but the Vikings are doing that, and they have clearly, in my mind, made an improvement by bringing in Everson Griffen, even if this is not the same 2017 version of Everson Griffen. It's also another example of how players love to come back to the Vikings after they leave. We saw Mackenzie Alexander come back. We saw Sheldon Richardson now, and now Everson Griffen, Stephen Weatherly as well. So the grass, I guess, isn't always greener on the other side as it is with Mike Zimmer's defense. Another note on Ihmir Smith-Marsette had a very good night the other night, and Mike Zimmer said after the game he called him dynamic. It will be interesting to watch in the final preseason game just how much of a chance Ihmir Smith-Marsette gets to separate himself a little bit more. He is clearly on the team, but right now has to be in the lead for the kick and punt returner positions. It would be nice to see him get actually a chance as a wide receiver, but one of the issues that they've had with him in terms of receiver is that the quarterbacks are struggling to get him the football. And Mike Zimmer was critical of the quarterbacks. He said that on a couple of different occasions, they were skittish, he called them, within the pocket. He thought that the pass protection was actually very good against Indianapolis, but he criticized the checkdowns and said it's going to take a lot of checkdowns if you're going to throw short passes to get all the way down the field. So against Kansas City this week, he wants to get more out of the offense in terms of explosive plays. And it seems like all indications are pointing to the starters actually playing in this game. And another note, by the way, is that he said he wasn't sure about whether Dede Westbrook would play in this game, but Westbrook is coming along in terms of his health and his recovery from ACL surgery. And he said that he's set to practice quite a bit more this week. So maybe there's a chance that we see Dede Westbrook at least available very early in the season. He has been sidelined, hasn't done much, has only pretty much caught punts, but has not done a whole lot of actual receiving work. So we'll be watching for that this week out on the practice field. Also, we'll be keeping an eye on whether the Vikings make any phone calls to any veteran quarterbacks after the performance that they received against the Colts and against the Denver Broncos. And also Mike Zimmer mentioned several times that there were some issues with pass blocking with running backs. Now, I'm not sure exactly who he was talking about had those problems, but Dalvin Cook did not play in the game. We'll see if Dalvin Cook actually gets an opportunity to play in this next game. We'll also be watching at practice how serious Adam Thielen's thigh bruise is, that he got hurt on a quick pass from Kirk Cousins during the game against the Indianapolis Colts. It didn't look serious. He only spent a few minutes with the trainer, but we'll see if he practices in full throughout this week. So Everson Griffen is back here, and now I think the Vikings defense has one of the best defensive lines in the NFL, and there are almost no weaknesses within the starting group. But Anthony Barr's status is still up in the air. We'll see if he's ready to start week one or if he gets a chance to play in the third preseason game or even practice this week after missing so much of practice. But now the defensive line, the cornerback group, they've been completely rebuilt through free agency and Danielle Hunter returning. So the Vikings, at least on the defensive side, have a full roster and should have very high expectations for this defense as they've filled one of their biggest weaknesses at right defensive end. All right, that's Purple Insider Extra. For more reaction, go find the podcast, Purple Insider Podcast. I will link it below, and read my instant reaction at purpleinsider.substack.com, and we'll catch you later.